Welcome to the Emergency Mind Podcast. I'm Dan Dworkis, and this is a space where we train ourselves to think and perform better during times of crisis. ER doctors or not, we all face emergencies in our lives, and this podcast is all about getting better at acting during times of uncertainty and stress and learning how to apply knowledge under pressure. So listen up, train hard, and enjoy, because you never know what's coming your way next. To learn more about building your emergency mind and to dig deeper into many of the concepts we get into in this podcast series, head over to our website at emergencymind.com. This episode is a conversation with Professor of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu Gustavo Gasperin. Professor Gustavo is a multiple-time world champion of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, having competed both in the gi and no-gi divisions. He holds a black belt under UFC champion as well as Brazilian Jiu Jitsu world champion Fabricio Verdum. He currently teaches Jiu-Jitsu in Los Angeles at Dynamics MMA and Uprise MMA, where I'm personally lucky enough to get to train with him. He's also the creator of the super popular and excellent website and learning community for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, MMA Leech. You can find that online at MMALeech.com. That's MMALEECH.com. Professor Gustavo is a truly deep thinker and an absolute expert in performance under stress. We cover a lot of ground in this conversation, and there's things in here that are useful to anybody, whether or not you're a practitioner of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. There are some great details in here about how we learn a skill, both in the beginning as a white belt and then later on as an expert, and a totally awesome conversation about how to not panic when you're in a tight position. As always on this podcast, our mission is to dive into applying knowledge under pressure, not to provide specific medical advice. Additionally, our opinions are our own and not those of our respective employers. All that said, let's get to the episode. I hope you enjoy. Professor, I am so happy to have you on to the podcast and talk about all this. It's been something I've really been looking forward to. And just thank you so much for coming on and talking to us.
Yeah, no problem. It's my pleasure.
Right on. I was hoping we could start. I was actually listening to a podcast that you were doing recently on the Next Level Guy podcast, and you were talking on there a little bit about the idea of the difference between sort of learning a technique in theory and then being able to apply that technique in reality, whether that reality is in a role in the gym or even on the street. And I think you made some comment that was similar to like, yeah, you can watch a lot of stuff on YouTube, but the gap between that and reality is really huge. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that idea.
Yeah, I think it's, especially nowadays, in Jiu-Jitsu more specifically, because there's so much stuff now available online, especially. There are books too, of course, but videos and YouTube and instructional courses, so much stuff about Jiu-Jitsu nowadays, that even the learning process is much faster now for the student, because there's so much resources outside. You can, watch like 24 hours a day if you want. There's so much content. But at the same time, all the information, you have to make sure you are able to do it. Some stuff you can learn, like general concepts and fundamental stuff that you probably don't even need to drill, but most of the stuff, the techniques, you have to actually drill and have a partner so you can try with him. You can see how it really works, because just reading or watching a video is not really gonna cut it, because you have to feel and practice and feel the weight of your opponent on top of you, see how the mechanics of the move work. So yeah, it does help, and getting the information it's the first step, I would say, learning, but then you have to actually practice, because otherwise it's not going to be automatic. It's not going to be part of your instincts when you really need it, right? So, and also once you start practicing, you need a number of reps, right? Because it's not going to be perfect or master or good enough within your first or 5 reps. So you need lots of reps, make sure the move is correct, and you can apply the move in different situations against different people, different body sizes, And then I think it makes more sense. That is going to be part of your arsenal, right? The learning and reading and watching, even in class, when you go to class, is just the first part. Then it gotta make part of your game, right? Gotta be part of your what you do.
Hmm. And how does that work? How do you take an idea and go from something that maybe you've seen it in class a couple of times? How do you make it part of your game, like you said?
Yeah. So I think it's mostly really through repetition, right? So I would say first part is learning, second part is trying the move. So in jiu-jitsu, we need a partner, right? There are some jiu-jitsu dummies out there for sale that you can also practice, but it's not the same. You need something
Hmm.
live, right? So you practice against your opponent, against your partner first, slowly to get the steps right, to get the mechanics right. Once you get the mechanics right, then you can start adding some speed, doing faster and faster. Then the opponent or your partner, sorry, offers some little resistance, trying to make a little more realistic, right? But the beginning is really is just going through it step by step without much resistance, and then once you feel good with the mechanics, you can add some speed, and then ask for your partner to add some resistance, and then that's how you start making the technique part of your game. And then, of course, I would say the later stage would be in live training or in competition, right? Because then always something is gonna be a little different, right? The scenario is a
Hmm.
little different. Maybe the guy moves a little different, or you are under pressure because your instructor is watching, or you are in a tournament or stuff like that. So I think those are the stages basically to learn something and actually be able to do it when it really counts.
Yeah, I'm having a flashback here to the other day in class when I was just about to apply an armbar and I looked up and saw you watching me and I got really excited and completely missed the armbar, which I think is a very
Yeah,
common occurrence, I would guess.
yeah, that's very common to everybody. Like I have a student that he says like, "Oh, I'm doing perfectly." Then you watch me, I there's exactly time when I fail. So yeah, it happened. I remember I used to do the same too. Everybody. I think there is a little pressure there, but mm, you know, talking about me specifically, I don't care. If you fail in front of me, oh, that's fine. That's fine because that's just part of the process. Everybody goes through that, and it's okay.
Exactly. And I think there's a real parallel there between the sort of arc you just laid out and how we train things in emergency care, which is the idea of, you learn a technique, you learn sort of the theory behind it, then you start deploying it very carefully in very controlled circumstances, and you train it that way, and then over time you add more and more pressure, either through simulation or through starting to tackle harder and more complicated cases, to the point where you're really doing it sort of in the wild, so to speak, when everything is there and there's the real sort of like blood and chaos. That arc is something that I think is really common to learning a lot of different things, I would say.
Yeah, I believe so because it's at the end of the day, if you wanna be good or a master at something, you have to you know try to get all the possibilities around, right? Oh, you're good at this. That's why also in jiu-jitsu we have belts, right? As you progress through the art, you get better and better and better, and you start seeing different scenarios. You go against someone better too. You go against someone heavier, someone who
Hmm.
moves differently, someone with different body sizes. So the person is lanky or the person is short. The the angles change, the leverage changed a little bit. So you have to keep adjusting because the way that you learn technique is a general idea, but you still have to adapt the same technique for different body types, different opponents. Some opponent is faster, some, like I said before, shorter, bigger, or
Hmm.
heavier. So there is a little variations that you have to do in order to make the same technique work. You have to change little angles, little things here, little things there to compensate for those situations.
Hmm. And I know we talked about just a second ago about how important it is in jiu-jitsu to have a real live partner that you're working with. But when you're sort of sitting by yourself, maybe you're thinking through how a technique works in your mind. When you're visualizing applying that technique, are you specifically visualizing it, applying it against a wide variety of partners? Like, do you imagine somebody that's short and imagine somebody that's tall?
Yeah, actually, usually not. Usually,
Okay.
I imagine someone. I would say I've never thought about that actually, but I think I imagine someone about my size
Hmm.
that I would be able to try that technique. And sometimes, yeah, I just lay on the floor and I start moving, like
Hmm.
trying to execute the technique, even there is nobody, if there is nobody with me. But I try by myself. I go to the floor. I move like the technique's supposed to work. And I think I imagine someone about my size because I'm gonna have to get some feedback from that person
Mm.
first to see if that's the correct way to do it. And then when I go against a different size partner, then I'm gonna have to adjust on the flight, basically,
Hmm.
in the
Interesting.
first time at least, right? Then with more experience, I will know against a bigger guy, I have to do a little change like this. And then, but the first time it has to be, right away. You have to, you know, figure out right away. And it's hard for the beginner to figure out right away because he doesn't even have the thought process. He doesn't have experience enough that
Right.
figuring out on the flight there is more for the experienced guys where they have experienced something similar before so they can adjust right away, right? They can, let's say, they can figure out, they can think for themselves, right, and figure out this stuff. The beginner usually he can't think for himself because he doesn't have enough knowledge, right? It's limited, the knowledge, so he kind of, if it either works or not, right? He doesn't
Hmm.
know how much to do adjustments. But the more experienced practitioner, he will definitely figure out stuff as it goes.
Yeah, I'm thinking as you're talking about this about a technique we use a lot in emergency care, which is intubation, which is where you're placing a breathing tube for an unconscious patient. And there's a lot of technical skill involved in actually getting the tube into the right place, but there's also a lot of sort of mindset and context skill about understanding, the whole picture and if something goes wrong, figuring out what exactly goes wrong and then what to do about it and how to adjust on the fly. And
Yeah,
when you're training people that are at the very beginning, or even when I look back at my own self at the beginning, it would be that very clear black and white, like, oh, like I won, I succeeded, I got a tube in the right place, or I failed, I didn't get a tube in the right place. But you don't really understand. There's so many nuances in there, and um, you can do a couple things correctly and still have a bad outcome. And understanding how to parse and sort of deconstruct what happened to work backward to figure out what to do is a really important skill set. Um, uh,
totally.
how does that play out for you? And maybe you could answer that, sort of casting yourself backward in time to a younger version that was just starting to learn jujitsu. Like when you first started making that transition from like, this is a plus or a minus to this is a much more nuanced kind of field. How did that work for you?
Yeah, I think to me it worked more really. I think maybe even in general, I think it's over time, really. I don't even remember when that started, but I
Hmm.
have a feeling that started when I really uh, started to take jiu-jitsu more seriously and training more days a week and training more hours per day.
Hmm.
So when I really dove into more, I started to accumulate more hours, and that helped me to start figuring out, okay, now, you know I don't even know how to describe it now. I think it was, I had to I had to figure out stuff because I was spending so much time on the mat that if this doesn't work, I cannot just abandon everything and quit. I have to keep working on this. I gotta make it happen because when you have like a limited, let's say, you spar like 20 minutes a day per class. Then kind of
Hmm.
it's not much time. You kind of and then you go like 5 minutes per round. Now, if it fails, okay, you look at the clock, the round is about to end, then kind of you don't care much. But when you do that over and over and over and over, you have to start, and sometimes there is no time limit, right? I think
Hmm.
that also helps. You doesn't matter if it's not working, you still have to, find a way, to make it work. So I think it happened to me in that kind of scenario. I had to start figuring out because I was there so much that I wasn't happy going home thinking about, oh my God, this is not working, and then I'm just quitting in the middle of the thing. It's not acceptable. I gotta keep working, and make the necessary adjustments.
Hmm. And what made you decide to become more serious about jujitsu, um, sort of in general?
Yeah, I think it's. I thought I was getting better. I mean, since the beginning, as a white belt, I kind of felt that even the higher belts, they didn't have an easy time against me. Even though I didn't know much,
Hmm.
but I felt that, yeah, when I learn more, I think I can be good at this. And then I started training, and then I started competing. Then my instructor was kind of he, yeah, he told me that, yeah, I could have a bright future if I dedicated myself. And he was very, anytime that I would not go to the class, he would call my home. He would call my mom and speak to my mom, and my mom then would tell me to go. And even though I was already like 21 or something, I was still living with my parents. And she would tell me, you go. Your coach just called you. You gotta go. You gotta go. And I think he was forcing me to go. I was undecided at that moment. I
Hmm.
didn't know if I really want to do or not because things started to get a little more serious there. Like I had to compete, I had to train every day, I had to do like physical training after the jiu-jitsu, and I saw that, well, I don't know if I want to get involved that much in this.
Hmm.
And then, yeah, I think that's how it happened. I was forced to go first, then he encouraged me, and then I started to figure out, yeah, I guess I could be good at this, even though I was like, man, it's a lot of work. And thing, anytime that you get promoted, then it just gets worse because it's more pressure now I'm a blue belt. I have to go against those blue belts that they have been blue belts for 3 4 years, so I'm starting from zero now again. And it's but yeah, I guess it worked out.
That's a really common theme that I hear among basically everybody I talk to about this idea of applying knowledge under pressure is that at some point you have to make that internal decision that this is something that you care about and that you care about it enough and that you take ownership of it. Being good at applying a skill under pressure doesn't happen by accident, whether that skill is emergency or jujitsu or anything else. And that switch somewhere in your mind about, you know what, this is mine. I own this. I'm going to be good at this is a pretty common theme. Um, Also, I got to say, like, thank the universe for moms to like keep us in line, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Totally, totally. Yeah, yeah. She played a huge role there for sure. A moment that I wasn't really sure if I should go or not. It was raining outside. Oh, okay, let's go.
Sounds about right. So as you were doing that sort of the initial phase of your training and maybe just after that point, so you've decided that this is something that you really want to do. How did you learn back then? Like was there differences between how you understood and learned jujitsu then versus how you're learning jujitsu now?
Yeah, yeah, there was big differences. Because of also two things. I would say the mentality back then was different,
Hmm.
and there were not many resources back then. Like I said previously, like nowadays is much easier. I think people are getting better, or getting their black belts faster nowadays because there's so much information out, out that
Hmm.
if you really want to go, you have enough stuff to supplement your training. Back then, it was just like the only way you could learn was going to the gym, really, and learning directly from your instructor because there wasn't many books or videos. There was no instructions, by the way,
Hmm.
back then, and maybe one book I remember, but you know, you had to go to the gym to learn, and so it slows down the process, right? Because you have 1 hour class, and then that's all. It's limited to that, and but also the mentality was different back then because back then it was really really hard. You had to be a competitor back then. You're either training jiu-jitsu to compete in a jiu-jitsu tournament or MMA, which was called Vale Tudo back then. So everybody that was there at the gym, they were athletes.
Hmm.
There was no jiu-jitsu for the general population, let's say, or for the hobbyists. It was you sign up to jiu-jitsu gym, you gotta train hard, you gotta be an athlete, and if you cannot keep up with that, you either quit or kind of the instructor he doesn't care about you, and
Hmm.
then eventually you're gonna quit anyways because no one pays attention to you. So yeah, the also the teaching style back then because it was so much focused on competition, there wasn't many the instruction was not focused on the concepts and really understanding jiu-jitsu. Back then the idea was not understand jiu-jitsu, the idea was just do it. You
Hmm.
go there, it doesn't matter what you do as long as it works. If it's bad ugly technique, it doesn't matter, which is still true to this day. If you go to a tournament, it doesn't matter how you win as long as you win. But
Hmm.
uh, you know I remember that I left Brazil when I was purple belt. Then I came here to the US, and I kind of nowadays I see the purple belts. The understanding of the jiu-jitsu is much better than me, for example,
Hmm.
compared to me back then because I didn't know much. I just knew how to do some moves, some techniques, but I really didn't understand the art. It was more like yeah, I know how to do here, but if you ask me a question, kind of, well, I don't know. This is what I do step by step, step one, step two, step three. But if you ask me conceptually, I wouldn't not understand much. Nowadays,
Hmm.
I think it's much better. Maybe if you're a hobbyist, probably you don't perform as well as those athletes, but you understand more. You can talk about it and understand why things work, why things don't work, even though you might get crushed, but your understanding is better.
Yeah. And do you think that, that focus on understanding the concepts, which sort of implicit in that is the idea that if you're a good athlete and a good competitor and you understand the concepts, then that's like the package. That's what you're going for, right? That's the magic. But
Yes.
but understanding the concepts, do you think that's a function of the different focus on teaching, or is that a focus on, or is that more on the learner side, like the learners are hungrier for different types of training?
uh, I think you know I can say that back then it was more coming from the instructor because I would like to learn much more concepts and have a better idea of what I was doing, but I couldn't because there was no resources outside of my instructor, and if my instructor was teaching the way he was teaching, like just go for it. Here's the technique.
Hmm.
Step one, two, three, four. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Bye. Figure it out. But you know, and I think that's how I learned, and there was no other way. They were teaching like that back then, and there was no outside resources. Nowadays, kind of you can choose. If you go to a gym that only teaches like that, you still can figure out concepts and better understanding online. and purchase courses that are going to help you. Back then, the mentality, like I said, was different. Almost every gym was like that, like just trying to breed champions and athletes and not really caring much if you understand what you're doing or not. What matters is winning, getting your medals or trophies, and that's it. So nowadays, if you're still training like that, that's your option, because if you can look outside and understand more the art if you want to.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm imagining, taking one of my interns and telling them to intubate by, okay, open the mouth, put the tube in, good, figure it out yourself.
Yeah,
That's just that's just like not a way that you'd want anybody to try to save your life, right? And
yeah,
and sometimes it would work and sometimes it doesn't. But I think that, I'm really fascinated by this idea because one of the great things about the wealth of knowledge and where we are sort of in society in general is that you can be both an expert at some things and a student at others, right? Like you can be like I can be an expert at emergency and a total beginner at jiu-jitsu, and
yeah,
together sort of like cross-pollinate and make these ideas come together. And so the idea of how do you learn a thing becomes really important.
yeah,
And I think what you said is very true about the wealth of knowledge out there. There's, in addition to the totally awesome stuff that you personally put on at MMA Leech, there's a bunch of folks out there that have these amazing ideas. There's a guy I tend to read his stuff a lot, John Donaher, who I'm almost always pronouncing his name wrong, right? This guy's a PhD in
yeah.
philosophy, I think.
I think so. Yeah, he's very, very smart and
Absolutely.
great coach. Great coach.
Oh, incredible. And the way that he dissects the sort of a particular move from a conceptual framework is just really amazing. Sort of the exact opposite of like, open the mouth, put a tube in, figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's why I think nowadays, let's say, yeah, it's easier. I'm not gonna say it's much easier, but it's definitely easier to learn faster and to get your belts faster, because everything now is kind of, it makes there's so much information, it makes more sense. If you really dive into, you're gonna be able to connect the dots much faster. There are great instructors out there online. You can learn so much stuff, and like you said before, the concepts and the understanding, plus with the athletics and the techniques, that's what makes the whole package there. And that's why maybe the John Danaher guys, they are really, really dominating the sport now. They're doing very
Absolutely.
well, especially Gordon Ryan, because
Hmm.
I think that teaching style is very important, because if you understand the concepts and how jiu-jitsu works, you can improvise in a much better way, because you don't need to know the technique, you just need to know the concept. You can apply the concept into different techniques, so it just makes your understanding better. And when you are there, when it really counts in a tournament or whatever situation, you can think for yourself much easier and figure out the situations. Yeah, the techniques, plus the theoretical knowledge behind that. So that's the whole package, and that's where I see that still kind of missing. Some instructors, for example, I changed my, let's say, my way of teaching. I broke from that pattern from what I learned in the past, because I learned that way. I wasn't happy the way that I learned, so I changed the way that I teach. Right? I don't teach the same way my instructor taught to me, because
Hmm.
it was just basically the techniques without concepts. So, but some instructors didn't change. That's the way they learn. That's the way they do still today. And there is a lot of gyms and a lot of students that they still receive information in that way. And it definitely makes a difference, if you explain, if you share the knowledge, the concepts, the how things work, instead of just, step by step. I think that makes a big difference for, the students in general. And if you have competitors, you will probably have better competitors and achieve more success because it's a more complete package without a doubt.
Makes a lot of sense. Um, I want to shift gears for 1 second, if we can,
Mhm.
and flash forward in time a little bit. We talked a little bit about sort of the beginning of your jiu-jitsu career. So take us a little farther forward, and maybe to one of the times where you're competing at one of the world-class events. Um, and can you talk us through a little bit about both like what that felt like to have the extra pressure and the extra stress of the situation, and then also a little bit about how did you train for that in particular?
Yeah, I think for me it took a long time until I was comfortable competing. I started competing as white belt throughout all the belts, but really at brown belt level. So maybe after almost 10 years competing, that's when I started to feel comfortable because I was very anxious,
Hmm.
I never liked to compete. I was basically forced to compete in the beginning because everybody was competing. Like I said again, like I said before, if you don't compete, then you're out. You cannot
Hmm.
join the gym, right? So for me, it took a while until I was able to actually enjoy and relax to the point where I was able to perform at the same level that I was performing at the gym because I was
Hmm.
always like underperforming, right? Because of the nerves, the anxiety, and everything. Too stiff, I couldn't move. And then basically after 10 years as a brown belt, I started to relax a little more and just I think it was just over time, competing, finding the a good mindset for the day, and then eventually I started to relax a little more and taking like well, it's not a big deal, it's just one more competition. I've been doing this for a while, if
Hmm.
I win, if I lose, it doesn't matter. Next month there's another competition, and then I guess that's how I started to relax and uh, you know also my results got better, because I had lots of third places, second places before, and few first places, and then gold medals started to come more often once I started to relax and just, well, this is just another day in the office. Let's go there and compete, and no big deal. Because in the beginning, no, it varies from people to people, but a lot of, I guess that the most common feeling is that you are like, you are not afraid of losing, but you are embarrassed, if you lose in front of your friends, teammates, and in front of your coach, in front of the audience. You're kind of, it doesn't feel good, of course. But
Hmm.
then kind of, after doing so many times, kind of, it doesn't matter. Most people that go there, they lose, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So there are only few gold medals, right? And most of people lose. So you go there, you try your best, and if it doesn't work, then next time it's gonna work, and you just train harder, and fix the mistakes, right? Because you always learn whenever you compete. You always learn when you're losing. There's always some stuff that you can fix, that you can adjust, some holes that you didn't know you had in your game. So over time, I think if I had a better someone to help me with the mindset, probably I would do better.
Hmm.
Or if I had, bought some books about it, how to perform, probably I would have a better mindset and go there more relaxed. Probably I would have better results earlier in my career, but there wasn't much teaching in that part, or I didn't even think about, buying some books to work my mental because, you know, it wasn't much talked about back then. So,
When you just mentioned that about how you would learn something in a competition that you realized you had to improve your game, what did that look like the next couple of days? Like, did you write that down? Did you just go to the gym and just drill that over and over again that next week, or what's your strategy for getting better from that point of view?
yeah. So, yeah, gladly, I guess after maybe even a blue belt, I had already always someone from my team or my wife or my girlfriend at the time. They would record, the match.
Hmm.
Well, because sometimes is during the confusion you don't even remember, right, what happened. Then you try to
Sure.
think about, you go home kind of, oh, I don't remember exactly what happened. So if there is someone filming it, it definitely helps. So I would go and I had a general idea what happened during the fight, but then I would watch the clip and see what happened, and yeah, I would see the mistakes that I made, and I would go to the gym and and drill them, find solutions, because you had to find the solution first, right, to see what was
Right.
the mistake was, and then it would take a few you know hours thinking about, after watching the video, okay, what should I have done, what should I move this way, should I use a different technique, the guy's countering like this, and then you start building counters or a different game plan there for that specific situation. And yeah, I would think about it, analyze, then go to the gym and drill those techniques, those specific moments where I messed up, to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And I have at least one, two, at least three options from there, right? If the guy does this, then I do that,
Mm.
and then building. Now that we are talking about that, I just realized that basically that's how I do when I release my courses. I just, I try to figure out different or as many answers as I can from that specific situation.
That's really interesting. The one of the episodes right before this, episode 7, where we had Dr. Dana Sajid on, he was talking about how when he goes home after a really difficult shift, he goes back and he runs the whatever the challenging case was, trauma or medical or whatever. He
Mhm.
goes back and he replays the case in his mind, and he
Yeah.
stops at the point where he thinks something went wrong, and he starts experimenting mentally. So he'll ask himself, well, what if I had done this? What if I had changed this right here? What if we had, activated this protocol earlier? And then sort of plays it out in his head over and over again as a way of getting better, which sounds very similar to the process you're talking about here.
Yeah, yeah. I think, yeah, that was huge for me. Like, it helped me a lot. I learned some stuff too when I got some stuff from my opponents, some techniques, some part of their games, and I transferred into my game, because, well, if it's so effective against me, I'm going to start doing it too, and yeah, I picked up some stuff from my opponents. I study what they do, then I started applying, because I think it's very, very useful. Analyze after things have happened. Even after you win. When you win, kind of, yeah, kind of, I'm good. But when you lose, you're kind of more forced. Like, oh my God, I cannot keep losing. I have to fix this. And then, yeah, I think it's a really, really important to go there, reveal what you did when you're losing, so you can just keep learning and getting better. That's the goal, I guess.
One more thing I want to switch to slightly. I was reading an article on your website, MMA Leech, that was tips for white belts. And one of the things you said really resonated with me, because there's a lot of crossover again to sort of emergency situations, which was uh, I forget what number it was, but it was don't let your emotions take over, especially when you're in a bad position.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that idea?
That's basically one of the most important things, I think, for everybody, but especially for the beginners, because it's too easy to panic, and everybody has done that. I don't know anyone, that
Absolutely.
haven't gone through that stuff, because when someone, especially you're in a bad position, let's say someone is mounted on you or side control, and then you try to escape one time and then it doesn't work, then okay, then you try again, it doesn't work, and then you just feel like, you know you start feeling horrible, because you're wasting energy, the person on top is still there, he's not moving, and you start panicking and feel claustrophobic, you can't breathe, and then it's just those things starts coming to your mind, that sometimes is not even true. Yes, you
Mhm.
can breathe, just focus there, and you know find a little pocket there of air and start breathing. But if you let the emotions go through and you start thinking like, you start panicking, oh, I can't escape, this guy is too strong, he's too good, he's too heavy, then things go bad really, really quick. And sometimes I think every beginner has tapped, because not because of the submission, just because he felt uncomfortable, he felt like he couldn't breathe, or there
Mhm.
was too much pressure on his chest, let's say, and he couldn't. He just panicked, basically. And then he panics, he tries to escape one, two, three times, like exploding, and then he fails, then the person taps. And that's more common for the beginners, but it still happens with the higher belts. I've tapped when I was a brown belt, first time that I rolled with Fabrício Verdun, who is the guy who promoted to black belt, and he's a heavyweight, but he's a world champion. He's super good, right?
Mhm.
So I've tapped for pressure when he got to side control. I couldn't escape, and I start panicking. I thought that was over already. That, well, that's just for white belts and blue belts. But well, I was a brown belt at the time, and I couldn't. I panicked that time, and I had to tap without any submission just because of the pressure, and I
Mhm.
panicked, and I couldn't escape. So yeah, that's one big thing, that the earlier you learn how to deal with that, the better, because that's not going to stop,
Yeah.
throughout your journey. When you are a higher belt, it, it's much easier to not fall into those positions, because you're so used and you have so much experience that you anticipate, you prevent, you don't let go that deep,
Mhm.
so never kind of, very rarely it gets that deep where you're completely getting crushed in a bad position, right? You always have a little angle here, a little angle there, where the guy cannot establish that full control, full position. But in the beginning, as a white belt or even blue belt, it's very common. It's like you're gonna be there almost every class. So
Yeah. Sounds very familiar. Yes.
yeah. So yeah, you have to. The earlier you know how to deal with that, just relax. Relax. Find your breathing there. Don't panic. Try to escape one, two, three times. If it doesn't work, if you're still stuck, then it's time to relax. And instead of trying to escape, you gotta wait a little bit. Wait for
Mm.
your opponent to move. When he moves, then is your opportunity to escape, because if he's moving, he has to give up some control, and then that's the opportunity to escape. He's not going to be as tight. He's going to be a little bit off balance, because he's trying to go to mount, or trying to move his legs or arms, or trying to attack you. The more he tries to attack you, the more he has to give up some control, and that's the opportunity to escape. So it's just finding that comfortable place where you can breathe, and waiting for the right opportunity. It takes a while until they'll develop that, staying calm and relaxed there, and waiting for the right opportunity, right? But it's the earlier we figure out that, the better, because it can be very, if you let the mind go to the wrong place, yeah, it's very easy to panic, very easy to give up and think that you can't breathe, you're about to die, or stuff like that. But it's not really the truth.
Yeah, that's so deep. And we see that all the time in emergency situations where you get people that are at the beginning or sometimes even more advanced, right? The
Yeah,
instinct is still there to just freeze a little bit
yeah,
and to, to say, well, I don't know what's happening here. And that fundamentally, we really do have a choice, and the choice is either panic or relax and apply knowledge. And
yeah.
you got to keep making that choice. You got to keep training that choice, and it doesn't necessarily get easier to choose it, but you get better at making the choice over time, I think.
Yeah, totally. I agree with that. It's over time, you have a little more experience, it's, it's kind of, okay, I've been here before, I know what to do,
Hmm.
I cannot allow my mind to have these thoughts,
Right.
these bad thoughts, and then just do what you have to do, like no emotion, mechanically, one step, second step, third step, get out of that hole, and you know cannot let your emotions play there too much. Otherwise, it's just like, and once it starts going down, then it's just like a downward spiral. Then kind of you're basically done. It's hard to get back. Still possible, but it's hard.
Professor, I want to be mindful of our time here and
Yep.
sort of wrap us up a little bit. You know, just to summarize a bit of what we covered today, which was awesome and super rich. And I'm going to come to your class tomorrow morning and see what small percentage of this I can apply in real life. But
Sounds
you
good.
know, we covered sort of the arc of learning and teaching, the idea of learning a skill and then starting to apply it under a little bit of pressure and then gradually going until you're really applying it live. And then the importance of, once you're starting to do that, to go backward and learn from your mistakes, to really deconstruct them and to use a combination of both visualization and then live practice to sort of improve based on what you've learned. And then a lot of talk about mindset, about the understanding that there are choices that you make in yourself and in your training, both choices to take this sort of decision seriously, and then on a moment to moment, the choice about what parts of your mind to deploy. Is it panic or is it calm and relaxation? Thinking about all of that, wrapping all that up, any last comments or thoughts, and/or anybody else that you'd ever want to see on this podcast?
What I could say just to wrap up this is, you know, um, more specifically for jiu-jitsu now, if you're a beginner, go to class and, you know, uh, be patient, learn your stuff, try to learn technique step by step, try to learn the mechanics, try to learn the concepts behind you, because the concepts you can apply to different techniques. And, you know, just like, yeah, like I said before, like, don't panic. The first year probably is gonna be the worst year, where you're gonna really decide if you're gonna keep with jiu-jitsu to the rest of your life, or if you wanna quit, because it's very, very hard. And depending on the gym that you are going to, it could be even harder, right?
Hmm.
Some gyms, they put you against the lions right away. They don't care. And some gyms, they take care of you a little more. But first year is, you're gonna see if you're gonna keep or not. And you know try to do your best, try to not panic. Remember what we talked about here today. It's part of the process. Learn how to control yourself mentally. You know that you're not gonna die, you're not gonna be out of breath. If you think you're gonna be out of breath, probably you will be. So keep
That's certainly true.
yeah, control your mind, and it's not the end of the world. If you have to tap, you tap, but go back home, study what you made it, your mistakes, and you'll probably get better over and over time. You'll be able to last, let's say.
So great, so great. Don't panic and enjoy the ride. Love
Enjoy
it.
the ride. Totally.
Yeah. Professor, thank you so much for talking to us. Totally an honor to be able to dig into this with you.
Yeah, it was really good to me. Honored to meet you, Dan.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Emergency Mind podcast. I hope you enjoyed it, but more importantly, I hope you found something in there that you can use next time you find yourself in the middle of an emergency. To learn more about what we talked about in this episode and about building your emergency mind in general, head over to our website at emergencymind.com.